This episode is a trackpads.com production.
Welcome to Beyond the Call, where history, leadership, and heroism come alive. Today's story explores Private James Henry Mills at Cisterna di Littoria in 1944, a powerful account of courage and responsibility in combat. If you enjoy learning more about military history and extraordinary individuals, you can find more articles, podcasts, and resources at trackpads.com. On a spring morning in Italy, in a narrow draw cut into the earth by water and war, a young infantryman was about to face his first true test under fire, with the lives of his platoon depending on what he chose to do next. Before we continue, I want to mention the Medal of Honor book series that accompanies this work. These books tell the stories of America's Medal of Honor recipients in a serious, readable, and historically grounded format, with each volume focused on a specific campaign, battle, or part of the war. They are available in color paperback, Kindle ebook, and matching audiobook editions. You can find them at militaryauthor.me. James Henry Mills was born in Fort Meade, a small town in Polk County, Florida, in 1923. He grew up in the long shadow of the Great Depression, in a community where hard work, faith, and looking after neighbors shaped daily life. Those habits taught him to shoulder responsibility without complaint and to see service as something ordinary people simply did. When global war finally pulled the United States into the fighting, that sense of duty found a new focus. Beyond the Call is the Monday feature of Dispatch, U.S. Military History magazine. For Mills, the path from a small Florida town to a battlefield in Italy began when he raised his right hand in 1943 and enlisted in the United States Army. Basic training turned the young civilian into an infantryman. The Army put a rifle in his hands, drilled him in the hard routines of marching and fieldcraft, and taught him to move with a squad as a single, coordinated unit. In training, he learned how to read ground, how to find cover where others saw only open fields, and how to listen for danger in the smallest sound. Just as important, he learned to trust the men around him, and they learned they could rely on his steady presence. Mills was assigned to Company F of the 15th Infantry Regiment, part of the battle-tested 3rd Infantry Division, a formation with a growing reputation for toughness in combat. By early 1944, Mills had joined that division on the Italian front in the bitter fighting that followed the Allied landings at Anzio. The countryside around him was a patchwork of fields, farmhouses, irrigation ditches, and low ridges scarred by months of shelling. Day after day, units pushed forward a few hundred yards at a time, only to be met by carefully placed German strongpoints that turned every ditch or fold in the ground into a potential trap. For Mills and his comrades in Company F, the war narrowed to a few simple realities: the weight of their packs, the feel of their rifles, and the knowledge that any advance might bring sudden, close-range contact with the enemy. That was the setting when his platoon moved toward a narrow draw near Cisterna di Littoria. On the morning of May 24, 1944, the 15th Infantry Regiment was pressing its attack as part of the effort to break out from the Anzio beachhead. Mills's platoon moved forward through low, open ground toward a draw that led straight toward a fortified enemy position. Machine guns and rifles were hidden along the edges, ready to fire on any movement. When the lead elements of the platoon came under heavy fire, the advance faltered, and the men found themselves pinned down by weapons they could not clearly see. It was here, at what his citation later called his baptism of fire, that Mills stepped forward and volunteered to precede his platoon down the draw alone. Moving ahead without direct support, he advanced roughly 300 yards along the ditch, using its bends and banks for what little cover they offered. Every few steps he had to judge whether the next curve might reveal a machine gun at close range. The air carried the sounds of distant firing, but in the draw itself there was a tense quiet that could break at any instant. Suddenly, a German machine gun just a few yards away opened fire on him. Mills reacted with trained reflex and personal resolve, bringing his rifle up and killing the gunner with a single shot, then forcing the assistant gunner to surrender before the weapon could be turned on the men behind him. He did not stop after that first success. Pushing on, Mills spotted another enemy soldier behind a bush, in the act of pulling the pin on a grenade. That grenade was intended for the draw, where the American infantry would have had almost no room to escape the blast. With his rifle steady and his voice firm, Mills ordered the man to drop the weapon and surrender, turning a near disaster into another captured enemy. A short time later, yet another soldier prepared to throw a grenade into the ditch, and once again Mills answered with a single shot that ended the threat. Each decision was made in seconds, but each removed a danger that might otherwise have killed several of his comrades. The fight did not get easier as he closed on the main position. At one point, a machine gun, 2 machine pistols, and several rifles raked the draw from only about 50 feet away, sending bullets tearing through the brush and splintering the soil at his feet. Instead of pulling back, Mills charged straight toward the flashes of the enemy weapons, firing his M1 rifle from the hip as he ran. The sudden, aggressive rush shattered the defenders' nerve. By the time he was within about 10 feet of their position, all 6 enemy soldiers threw down their weapons and surrendered, choosing captivity over a fight they no longer believed they could win. Even after that, one more machine gun barred the way forward. From a distance of roughly 20 yards, it opened fire on Mills, trying to cut him down before he could close again. He answered with another precise shot that killed the gunner, sending 2 nearby soldiers into a panicked run. Mills fired twice more, dropping one of them, and advanced to take yet another prisoner. With each movement, he thinned the ring of fire that surrounded the main strongpoint. Yet he could see that a normal assault, with the platoon emerging into the open, would still leave many men dead in the ditch. He needed a different approach. Mills volunteered to act as a one-man distraction, allowing the rest of the platoon to maneuver. Climbing up onto the exposed bank of the draw, less than 100 yards from the strongpoint, he stood in full view of the defenders. He fired directly into their position and shouted challenges and insults, making himself the most obvious target on the field. Almost at once, enemy machine guns and rifles swung toward him, and a storm of bullets clawed at the rocks and soil around his body. Tracers passed within inches of him, and pistol rounds sparked from the stones near his boots, but he stayed on the bank until his rifle was empty. Only then did he drop back into the ditch to reload, taking a few moments to breathe and fill his magazine. When he was ready, he climbed out again and repeated the same dangerous performance, once more drawing enemy fire away from the concealed platoon. In all, he did this 4 times, each appearance on the skyline buying his comrades a few more precious seconds. While the defenders focused on the lone figure they could clearly see, the platoon moved down a shallow ditch to within about 50 yards of the objective, unseen by those who were shooting at Mills. His body had become their shield and their distraction. From that covered position, the platoon launched its final assault on the strongpoint. The German soldiers, already shaken by Mills's earlier attacks and confused by his repeated reappearances, were quickly overwhelmed. The assault ended with 22 enemy soldiers captured, their weapons silenced, and the objective secured without a single casualty in Mills's platoon. The official Medal of Honor citation would later describe this in formal language, speaking of conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty. On the ground, it had been simpler and starker, one man choosing again and again to stand where the fire was heaviest so that others would live. The citation also notes how he preceded his platoon down the draw and advanced 300 yards to reach a position from which the attack could be launched. Behind that measured phrasing lies the experience of moving alone through a confined space where every bend might hide an enemy gun. When it records that he killed machine gunners with single shots and forced others to surrender, it captures the blend of skill and will that allowed him to control fights at only a few yards' distance. In describing how the enemy became demoralized by his charge and how his ruse of standing exposed drew fire away from the platoon, the citation points to the psychological impact of seeing a soldier who seemed to ignore fear. Tactically, Mills's actions turned a deadly choke point into a doorway for the regiment's advance. The strong point his platoon seized controlled a route that the unit needed if it was to keep pushing inland from Anzio. Had the position held, the attack might have stalled, buying the defenders time to bring up reserves and strengthen the next line. Instead, the path was opened by shock, speed, and the bravery of a single private, and the Allied drive toward Rome gained one more hard one step. Moments like this, repeated across the front, slowly bent the campaign in the Allies' favor. In terms of leadership and character, Mills's story shows that influence on the battlefield does not depend solely on rank. As a private, he had no formal authority to issue orders to the platoon, yet his choices shaped what the unit could do. He practiced leadership by example, taking on the most dangerous tasks and staying focused under intense pressure. His calm at close range, whether ordering an enemy to drop a grenade or charging a firing position, demonstrated a blend of courage and control. His willingness to make his own body a target so others could move is a lasting lesson in responsibility and selflessness. After the war, the Army recognized his actions with the Medal of Honor, formally acknowledging what his comrades already knew from that day in the draw. Mills returned to Florida carrying the memories of Italy and the weight of what he had seen and survived. Like many veterans, his post-war life was not simple, and his story includes both honor and struggle. Remembering him fully means seeing not only the young private on the battlefield, but also the man who had to live for many years with the echoes of combat. His experience reminds us that the cost of extraordinary bravery often continues long after the shooting stops. Today, the name James Henry Mills appears in lists of Medal of Honor recipients, in unit histories, and in memorial spaces. His grave and the places where his story is told invite visitors to think about more than a line of text. They point back to a moment in 1944 when a single soldier, standing alone on an exposed bank under a storm of bullets, chose to act for the sake of his platoon. In hearing and retelling his story, we keep alive the memory of a man who went beyond the call of duty in a narrow Italian draw, and in doing so, we honor all those who faced similar choices with the same quiet courage.